Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today's video I'm very excited to do because the retro glam eyeshadow palette finally made it and I have it here in my hands. Today I'm going to do a review on the palette, share look tutorials with you, and give you my final thoughts at the end of this video. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Eve and I love all things beauty. If you enjoy talking about makeup, especially learning or being inspired from look tutorials, this is the right video for you. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like and I invite you to subscribe to my channel if you haven't done that already. Without further ado, let's dive in. Here in my hands I have Natasha Denona Retro Glam Palette. This is a midi-sized palette from Natasha Denona. Palette retails for $69. The outside box looks just like a palette itself. And the reverse side, as always, you see all the ingredients for each shade, more information on where the palette was made and expiration date. All the shade names also listed. I personally really love design on this palette. This time around the palette is a little bit thicker because it does have almost like a three-dimensional design that is protected with a clear cover that is not removable. And if we compare it to this palette, this is my dream palette that was just recently launched. It is just a little bit thicker. Everything else really feels up to the quality. The mid-sized palettes of Natasha Denona have these holes in the back, pop out the eyeshadows from the pans. This palette was made in Italy and the shelf life is 24 months. All the makeup that I'm wearing, guys, will be linked for you in the description box as always, as well as all the recipes for each look, just like in my other video tutorials. So I'm going to start with this shade Lucy. This is the lighter taupey shade. I'm using my Refer 15 brush. I'm going to go in very thin layers just to build up a little bit of definition, or hopefully to build up some definition. This shade is very pretty, however, it is very, very close to my skin tone. So I don't know how much of it is actually going to show up, but we still like that very light transition to start with. I'm just staying on the very outer portion of my crease here. I think I'm going to leave it at that. I know that you can't see much because this shade is very close to my skin tone. Now I'm going to go into the deeper taupe. It's called Faye, also matte shade. I'm going to keep the same brush and I'm going to start applying it just here a little bit lower, more so into my crease. With this shade, you definitely get a little bit more color showing through. Add the same color just on the outer corner portion with the same brush. I just want to get a little bit more shadow right here in this outer corner. I'm going to switch the brush and apply the same shadow Faye onto my lower lash line all over. This shadow shade is taupe, but it does pull very gray on me. And the more I layer it on my skin, the more gray it looks. It is, however, a little bit softer than if I would put a true gray on my skin. There is a slight kickback between these two shades that I so far used, but once I apply them on my eyelids, there is really no fallout, so that I really love. Then I'm gonna go into this very small smudging brush. I'm going into the shade Jazzy. This is a darkest shade in the palette. It is also shimmery and it has quite a bit of a texture. So when I pick it up on a brush, I wanna also tap my brush off. Here, I just want to outline this here on my lower lash line, create a little bit more definition. I definitely achieved a little bit of depth here, but this shade does not really give me that chocolate shade that you see in the pan. Next, I'm gonna go into this type of brush. It's Morphe M506. I'm going into the same shade Jazzy. I'm gonna build up this outer corner. This shade is shimmery, however, because I'm picking up just tiny bit and tapping off my brush quite a bit as well, this gives me like a little bit of a satin effect. However, it doesn't give me a lot of shimmer or glitter or reflection. It just gives me like that very soft satin effect, which I don't mind for the outer corner, especially for your like gray toned smoky eye. I find it to be having a little bit softer effect. So for this type of look specifically, I do not mind this shade to be a little bit more reflective and not just flat matte. I can definitely layer it here a little bit to deepen up this outer corner. However, I think this is probably as far as I'm gonna get this shade to work for me. I'm switching to my flat brush and I'm going into this shade Maxi. And when I pick it up with the brush, you guys can see that there's a really nice amount of product on it. So it's definitely a different texture from the shade Jazzy that I just used for my outer corner. I tapped this brush off and a lot of it came off. So it does have a texture. So I would say you could even spray this shade, apply this shade towards the outer corner. I want these two shades blend into each other. Now that I'm applying it, and you can see it for yourself as well, that this shade actually has the same color almost, but it does have a slightly more shimmery finish. In the pan, they look very different. This is more chocolatey brown. This is definitely giving you a little bit more taupey vibe. However, when you apply it, they do have the same grayish tone under it. I cleaned off my flat brush and I'm going into this shade Oscar. It seems to have the same texture as Maxi, the shade that we just used right here. So I'm just going to apply this shade here. This applies very beautiful, you guys, very soft and smooth shade. Also has a very beautiful opacity. I'm taking my very small brush and going into this brightest shade that's called Flutter, like a champagne shimmer shade. It does have quite a bit of texture. Put this in my inner corner. This shade does build up really nicely. This has more glitter when you apply it on a larger area. For personally going forward, I don't think this is something that I'm going to be using. I'll probably just use my highlighter to put under my brow. This is the finished look. I added this pencil by Clinique on the waterline. This is the shade Slate Superhero Mascara. I added a little bit of a liner, which I dipped into my dream palette of Natasha Denona in the shade Blackest Black. I really felt like this look needed definition to my liking. These are all the shades, guys, that I used for this look. And this on top, this is a swatch from that shade Lucy that we started with. It really is very close to my skin tone. I am going to start with the shade Holly, and I'm using my blending brush from Ulta Beauty. Start right here, again, thin layer. It's like the dusty pink. Oh my god, I love this color. If you guys see my background, well, right now you can, but like decorative things in my room and that dusty pink shade, one of my favorite colors. Next, with this shade called Belle, very similar shade but slightly bit deeper. I'm building up my crease. Both of these shades also blend beautifully into each other. Same shade Belle on my lower lash line. I really like this color, but I need a little bit more dimension. I'm gonna go into this deepest shade Jazzy. Add the same shade on my lower lash line on the outer third. Now I'm gonna go into this brighter shade again, put it right here in my inner corner. For my lid, I really like to use this beautiful shade called Flare. I just took a little bit of time to do several layers of the shade with a flat brush, and this is the payoff. I think it's actually very, very pretty. I'm gonna go back into that Jazzy shade, and I would like to redefine this area. Okay guys, this is a finished look. I did add mascara and the same blackest black shade just on the outer third upper lash line from my dream palette. Again, I needed a little bit more definition here. And then on my waterline, again, I do have the Clinique shade Slate pencil. This is a really nice soft gray. These are all the shades that I used for this look, including the pencil. So for this look, I'm going to use this little piece of tape. I'm going to start with the shade Lucy. Start placing it here. I'm using my Refer 15. I'm building up this shade to its full potential. For this next portion, I'm going to go into this shade Jazzy. I'm really not sure which brush is going to end up working for this particular move that I'm about to pull through, but I'm going to start with this smaller fluffy brush. I'm going to look down like that and start placing it in the inner corner. As I reposition the mirror right in front of me and looking straight ahead into the mirror, going to create this fake crease very high up, creating this arch. Now that I have the outline, I am going to that same shade Jazzy. I'm going to do another layer. For this next step, I'm using the same shade Jazzy, but switching a brush. Now I'm taking my flat brush and I'm going into the shade Flutter. And I'm gonna apply the shade here on my lid. This shade is more of a topper. It has a beautiful pearlescence to it. There's some glittery particles as well. This shade does build up, and I'm bringing it also up to my brow bone, so there's like a soft glimmery transition. The same shade Flutter in my inner corner. This is a fun part. I'm going into my blue pencil. This is by NYX. The shade is Sunrise Blue. Place it on my waterline. This shade is beautiful, bright, cobbled blue, and it also does have metallic particles in it. Now I'm going to place this on the lower lash line everywhere. Now I'm taking my small smudging brush, smudging this into my skin so it's just nicely blended on my lower lash line. Okay, once again, guys, I'm gonna reach into the brown shade that is in my Dream palette. I just need a little bit more depth. If you have any other brown shade, something that would give you a little bit more depth right here, you can do that. So all I want to do is just get a very, very small brush and just put it right here in the corner. I just want this corner to be a little bit more smoky. I added lashes and the blue Voluminous by L'Oreal mascara on my lower lashes, and also added them a little bit on the outer corner to tie the bottom and top lashes together. These are all the shades that I use, including that shade Lucy. I'm gonna first start with the shade Fringe. It almost looks a little bit minty. This is a tricky shade for me personally to work with because my skin is very pale, especially around the eyes where I have like vein going through here. You can bring that blueness from underneath my skin and make me look a little bit like I'm sick. So I just want to make sure when I do this types of looks like this, I want to make sure that my eyelid is nicely sealed and prepped. With the same brush, I'm going to go into this shade Sage. I'm going to deepen up this outer corner and the crease. Same shade Sage on my lower lash line, and with a smaller brush into the shade Evergreen. This is the only cream to powder formula that is in this palette. I want to deepen up this outer corner. On my lower lash line, I'm going to this shade Jazzy because I need a little bit more dimension on that lower lash line. In my inner corner, I'm going into this beautiful shade Palladian. This gives you a really nice icy effect, very nice and bright shade. On my flat brush, I'm going to pick up the shade Oz, apply it right here towards the outer corner, overlaying it on top of that matte shade Evergreen. I'm noticing a very minor fallout right here, and just cleaning off my brush and going into this shade right here called Marlin. Okay guys, this is a finished look. I added a mascara. On my waterline, I added this pencil by LA Girls in the shade Dragon. These are all the shades that I used for this look. For this look, I wanted to do something very easy and very airy. I started with the shade Lucy in my crease, then used the shade Jazzy to create the wing. For the lower lash line, I applied the shade Oz, and I placed single shade Marlin all over my lid to create that aerial finish. And I finished off the look with the shade Flutter in my inner corner and brow bone. And the look that I'm wearing on today came from the inspiration of the palette itself. I really wanted to do something using both like greens and pinks. These are all the shades that I use. First, I went with this shade Faye into my crease and all over my lower lash line. Then I wanted to deepen up the look a little bit right on the inner corner in the V area with this shade Jazzy. For my inner portion of my upper lid, I went with this shade Belle. For my inner corner, I went with this lightest shimmer shade Flutter. Look, I really wanted to bring the green to this look, and I went back into this shade Evergreen, and I placed placed it on my lower lash line, and I used this LA Girl Shockwave pencil on my waterline. I finished off with lashes. So let me guys know what you think of the looks and which one was your favorite. I think it's time for my final thoughts. Most of the Natasha Denona mid-size palettes have a pretty simple design. It looks like this year Natasha Denona really wanted to be creative and launch these two palettes with completely different designs, which I'm not complaining at all. This is really beautiful. This palette is a combination of mini retro and the midi-sized Glam palette, which I personally do not own. The formulas are pretty consistent. This palette also does not have any existing shades. All these shades are absolutely brand new. I did not encounter any duds formula wise. It is pretty consistent quality throughout, which I did not expect any less from Natasha Denona. When this palette was launched, I was really drawn to the color story instantly because I do have one very special palette in my eyeshadow palette collection that this palette reminds me of. And that palette that I'm going to show you in just a moment really has my heart, and it lives on my vanity right here because I reach for it all the time. And when I saw this color story revealed from Natasha Denona, I did want to try the same favorite color story that I already love from a different palette with Natasha Denona formula. It is a holiday launch from the brand. However, to me personally, this does not scream holidays. You can use your makeup as you see fit. You do not have to be seasonal with your makeup options. First, when you look at this palette, you do not see right off the bat a lot of depth. These two shades right here, Jazzy and Evergreen, they are the deepest. I would say that they would give you kind of like a medium depth. There are also different shimmer formulas in this palette. The shade Flare, Jazzy, and Flutter, they seem to have more texture and pretty good amount of fallout. And then there's a little bit smoother, different shimmer formula. Shades Marlin, Oz, Palladian, Maxi, and Oscar. As much as I like my matte eye looks, I, however, love my shimmers. And I feel like this shimmer formula is lacking an impact for me. They're more of like your satin shimmers rather than being very punchy and reflective. I feel like the mood of this palette is generally a little bit more muted and soft pastel-like. I really found myself going into this shade Jazzy quite often, if not every time, because I wanted to get that depth a little bit to my looks. Even though I like this palette, I don't love it. I would definitely make few changes here. For example, this shade Lucy, it is very, very close to my skin tone, and I feel like we could easily skip it and maybe give us another darker matte, maybe like a brown or darker teal. Even though this color story seemed to be different, however, it's pretty dupeable. While I was waiting for this palette to be delivered to me, I went through my entire collection, and according to the swatches online for this palette, I pretty much found every single shade within my own already existing collection to be as close to this color story as possible. I can't say that any of these shades are actually very unique to what they are. The one palette that I wanted to show you as a comparison is Read My Mind by Nabla. You guys have heard me talk about this palette on my channel, on my Instagram. Read My Mind palette definitely has two of these rows dedicated to the pink tones or burgundy tones, and then there's only two of the teals. The quality of this palette is superb. If I would have to pick between these two, I was really excited about the combination of like sages and dusty pinks. And when I started playing with this palette, my looks would come out somewhat muddy. Today's look came out, I think, okay. This is definitely not my favorite look I've ever created. I find this palette having a lot of resemblance with the mid-size Zendo palette. It's like its muted sister. If you enjoy tutorials and reviews of Natasha Denona palettes, I will leave my Natasha Denona playlist at the end of this video. These are my thoughts, you guys. I hope you enjoyed this video and found this helpful. And I invite you to subscribe to my channel if you haven't done that already. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next videos. Bye.